Albuquerque childhood, sunlit days, and small secrets. I'm Rachel, now 27, and if I close my eyes, I can picture the dry heat shimmering over our old house on Juniper Lane. My little brother, Lucas, 3 years younger, would race me down the driveway, just as our Grandma Rosa called us in for lemonade. Our family was a mixture of cultures. My dad from Arizona, my mom from Puerto Rican roots, and every corner of our home was filled with laughter, loud music, and the smell of sweet corn soup. There was magic in those Albuquerque summers. Lucas and I weren't just siblings. We were co-conspirators and fellow dreamers. We built forts out of moving boxes in the backyard, whispered our wildest plans under the glow of the nightlight, and swore to always stick together, no matter what. He'd sneak extra Oreos from the kitchen and split them with me, the way only a brother could. Sometimes our adventures went sideways, like the time we borrowed Dad's old camera and nearly dropped it in the koi pond. I remember crying, but Lucas hid the evidence and held my hand until I stopped. Even as we squabbled about silly things. Whose turn was it on the Xbox? Who left the front door open for tumbleweeds to sneak in? Every fight melted just as quickly as it flared up. Mom called us her little hurricanes, unstoppable, unpredictable, and impossible to separate. Every Sunday, we'd pile into the truck for Mass, Grandma fussing with Lucas's shirt collar, while I'd roll my eyes and giggle behind her. I didn't know then how precious those days would become. Back then, trust was simple, breakable only in the smallest ways, like a pinky promise or a shared secret. Those early years in Albuquerque laid the foundations for the joy and, eventually, the heartbreak that would follow. Looking back, I see how innocence and trust were woven into the fabric of our childhood. And I wonder if we ever truly understood how fragile that fabric could be. The unseen weight behind every bond. As we grew into our teenage years, the nature of our sibling bond changed. Subtle, quiet, but undeniable. I became the big sister in every sense. Not just the one with the driver's license, but the unofficial shield between Lucas and the world's first real stings. High school in Albuquerque had its thrills. Friday night football games, smoky barbecues, lingering desert dusks. But it also hid its share of threats. Peer pressures, unspoken expectations, and family hopes that sometimes pressed too tightly. Lucas was always the dreamer, while I was the careful one, the planner, the worrier. If he forgot a homework assignment, I'd make up an excuse for him to Mom. When a lie snowballed about where we were Friday night, I'd be the one to take the brunt of Dad's disappointment, shielding Lucas from the worst of it. There was a time, on the night before his toughest chem final, when I helped him improvise his lab report just to save him from failing. In those moments, I convinced myself this was love, that blood meant always having each other's backs. No questions asked. On the outside, it looked easy. Inside, though, being the strong one had its costs. Sometimes I wondered if Lucas understood how tightly I held our world together, or how much I worried about protecting the joy we'd grown up with. It was a silent contract, written in late-night talks and long drives through Albuquerque's glowing city lights. I felt both pride and vulnerability. Pride in being the sister who could fix anything, and vulnerability in knowing that trust, once given so freely, could so easily be tested or lost. That's the thing people never tell you about sibling bonds. The deeper you love, the more you risk, and the more you carry in silence, hoping everything will turn out the way it did when you were both children. Racing backyard ghosts under the New Mexico sun. The heartbreaking cut of betrayal. There's a moment, sometimes, when the world seems to tilt beneath your feet and nothing feels real. For me, that moment came on a gray winter afternoon during my junior year of college, when trust, so carefully layered and fiercely protected since childhood, shattered in ways I still struggle to name. Alex had just finished high school and was supposed to start community college that spring. Our parents, hopeful and maybe a bit naive, trusted him with the savings meant for tuition. A small but hard-earned fund, Mom tucked away in an envelope hidden in her dresser drawer. The plan seemed simple. Alex would use the money for enrollment in books, moving one step closer to the family's shared dream, a first college graduation. At first, everything seemed fine. Alex told us he'd registered for classes and bought supplies, but small things started to unravel. The textbook he showed me was a borrowed copy, and his stories grew vague. He was waiting on class schedules or meeting advisors who never called back. My stomach tightened every time Mom asked for details, and Alex ducked the question. I wanted to believe him. I'd grown up believing in him. But there's a heaviness that creeps in when loyalty blurs with fear. Was I helping my brother by covering for him, or enabling something I didn't understand? One night, while looking for receipts for a family expense, I found the empty envelope. All the college money was gone. My hands shook. I waited for Alex in the kitchen, the familiar hum of the fridge suddenly too loud. When he finally came home, I confronted him, not as the overprotective sister, but as someone desperate for a truth that might hurt us both. He tried to laugh it off at first, but I saw panic rise in his eyes. Through tears and angry whispers, the truth came out. Alex hadn't enrolled in college. He'd spent the money trying to impress friends, buying a used motorcycle, splurging on nights out, even lending cash to a friend in trouble. He'd been lying to everyone. I remember the chasm that opened inside me, part sorrow and part rage, as I realized the brother I'd trusted was capable of hurting not just himself, but all of us. My thoughts spiraled. How much had I shielded him from? Did he turn to this because he trusted I'd always protect him, no matter what? Or because he never learned consequence? What followed was a week of tense silences and raw confessions. Mom was heartbroken, but didn't know the full story. Dad, stoic and proud, seemed at a loss, caught between anger and helplessness. Alex avoided everyone, locking himself in his room. My anger twisted into something colder, a sense that the family I'd worked so hard to keep close was coming apart, one lie at a time. When Mom eventually asked about the missing money, Alex let me take the fall. He told her he'd handed the envelope to me for safekeeping, and I'd lost it. I saw the disappointment in her eyes, the hurt that ran deeper than any punishment. I was furious with Alex for betraying me and for turning our mother's trust against me, with myself for stepping in so easily, for loving my brother enough to carry his shame. Betrayal isn't only the breaking of a promise. It's the moment you look at someone you love and see a stranger staring back. That winter, Alex drifted farther away. He picked up odd jobs, but skipped family dinners, always mumbling excuses or disappearing into the city night. Our conversations dried up. No more midnight laughs, no more backyard schemes. Still, part of me watched and waited, wanting him to come back, to understand the weight of what he'd done, and maybe, just maybe, to make it right again. The fury and the revenge. Plan. Rage is a funny thing. It sneaks in quietly after heartbreak, looming larger with every silence and every memory chipped away by disappointment. For weeks after Adam pinned the blame for the missing envelope on me, I seethed. My fury was molten, not the wild tantrum of childhood, but the low, simmering ache of someone who has been wronged by the person they trusted most. I replayed the scene with Mom in my mind, her tired eyes searching mine for answers, her voice subdued when she asked about the money. I could have blown everything up right then, told her the truth, watched Adam squirm, seen the scales tip squarely onto his shoulders. But something stopped me. Was it loyalty, habit, or an old, stubborn hope that he'd right his own wrongs? Instead, I did nothing. Or rather, I chose a kind of revenge that was far colder, quieter, and, at least at first, sweeter than any dramatic revelation. I pulled away from Adam, inch by inch, withdrawing that protection he'd leaned on since childhood. No more texts late at night to bail him out. No more cover stories for his missteps. I left the silences between us to grow wild and tangled. When Mom or Dad questioned him about his schoolwork, I said nothing. If Adam's friends called, I let them reach his voicemail. At school, I saw him stall for the first time. There was no helping hand for makeup assignments, no older sister to answer for the artwork he doodled in margins instead of algebra. Adam floundered, his grades dipping, his teachers calling home. He started skipping family dinners, retreating into his room as the holiday lights from downtown Albuquerque blinked through frosted windows. I watched, both resentful and sad. Even then, I missed him. The brother who once leapt into the Rio Grande with me. The boy who carved secrets into the mulberry tree. But more than anything, I wanted him to feel the full consequence of what he'd done. It wasn't malice so much as a need to balance the scales, not to punish him exactly, but to force him to see the mess he'd made. I stopped covering for Adam at every turn. When Mom, still suspicious, yet refusing to believe her youngest could let her down, asked about the lost money, I didn't reinforce his story or invent a new one. I just shrugged and said, I didn't know. The look in her eyes said she was coming to her own conclusions. Dad, never as easy to fool, began to watch Adam with subtle disappointment curling in the lines of his jaw. The harder Adam tried to hold the old narrative together, the more it began to unravel around him. The silence between us, once a place of shared confidence, turned cold. A wall constructed out of every unanswered call, every moment of restraint when I might have stepped in to save him. It wasn't easy. There were nights I wrote and rewrote messages I never sent, lines that started as accusations, but always ended as questions. Were you ever going to tell the truth? Did you think I'd always take the fall for you? One afternoon, I walked into our backyard, tracing the spot beneath the mulberry tree, where we once traded secrets. I realized I didn't need to expose Adam or shame him publicly. He was already drowning in the consequences of his own choices. My absence was a mirror, and every time he saw me, aloof, cool, no longer a shield, he had to face himself. I'd wanted him to learn what it meant to lose the trust of someone who once would have followed him anywhere. Looking back, that was my version of revenge. I didn't raise my voice, didn't force a confrontation. I just stepped back and let the world teach him the lessons I never could. Over months, I watched my brother change. Not quickly, not dramatically, but little by little. There's a unique pain in loving someone enough to let them fall, and an even sharper ache in watching them hit the ground. But in truth, it was the only way either of us stood a chance of finding our footing again. For the first time, I relinquished the urge to protect Adam, letting my anger do what my words never could. Show him where responsibility begins and blind loyalty ends. The bittersweet silence. For weeks after the dramatic unraveling of our trust, the house in Albuquerque sat steeped in a silence that was almost tangible, A silence that curled around the furniture, crept under the kitchen door, and pooled in the gaps where laughter used to echo. I never imagined that a bond built from so much shared history could suddenly feel so frail. I found myself walking through memories like ghost towns, wondering how absence could have a flavor, both bitter and sweet at once. My days grew quieter. Mom still played her old boleros while washing dishes, the melodies liquid and mournful, but there was a rawness in the air. Dad retreated further into his work, offering fewer words at the dinner table. Lucas, whose betrayal had changed everything, was barely a presence, his shoes by the door, but his spirit somewhere far from home. He came and went at odd hours, his questions and jokes replaced with mumbled apologies and the rattle of his keys. I threw myself into routine, clinging to anything that felt normal or solid. School, chores, errands for Grandma Rosa. I became expert in avoiding both confrontation and comfort, slipping through rooms like a cautious guest in my own life. Every time Lucas passed me in the hallway, I could feel 100 unsaid things humming between us. The apology he couldn't voice, the forgiveness I wasn't ready to imagine. The silence was almost a conversation, a call and answer of pain, longing, and the ache of letting go. The fascinating thing about silence is that it's rarely empty. For us, it swelled with hidden looks from across the breakfast table, hesitant smiles that flickered and died, and the awkward missteps of a new reality neither of us wanted but couldn't escape. Sometimes, Lucas would linger in the doorway to my room, a silent question in his eyes, a hope for some sign that I could still see the brother behind the broken promises. I couldn't give it to him, not yet. Instead, I let the distance do what words couldn't, teach us both the weight of what had happened. At first, I thought this silence would be a punishment, not just for Lucas, but for myself, a way of holding on to my anger and protecting what little I had left of my childhood ideals. But with each passing day, the stillness morphed. It became a kind of shield, yes, but also a space for reflection. In the absence of the noise that had once defined our lives, I found myself listening more closely to the creak of the old floorboards, to the sagging cadence of my mother's prayers, to the chirping of crickets outside my window late at night. Each sound reminded me that life was moving forward, even if our hearts lagged behind. A strange sort of freedom came with that silence. I stopped feeling compelled to fix Lucas's messes or fill dead air with forced apologies. I learned to let my own emotions run their course without stifling them for someone else's sake. There were nights when I missed him so fiercely that I'd clutch my pillow, cursing myself for my stubbornness. But there were also flashes of relief, flashes where I sensed the beginning of something like healing. The world outside continued on its own terms. At school, friends noticed I was quieter, but I deflected questions with practiced ease. Teachers asked about Lucas's absence or his slipping grades. I shrugged, unwilling to betray his secrets further. Grandma Rosa observed it all with a wise, watchful eye. One Sunday afternoon, she found me in the garden with the weeds and said softly, "Forgiveness sometimes grows in silence, mija. Give it time. Your heart knows when it's ready." I didn't answer her, but I let her words settle into me like seeds in dry New Mexico earth. The holidays came and went, stripped of their usual color and chaos. During Christmas, Lucas left his gift for me, a battered copy of our favorite childhood book, at my bedroom door. He didn't wait for me to open it. I turned the pages and let myself remember the old stories we used to invent, the heroes and monsters, the promise that nothing would come between us. The memory stung, but beneath it, a sliver of understanding began to glimmer. Nothing stays broken forever, not if you're willing to nurture what's left. Inside that endless hush, I realized silence could be sweet. Not because it was easy, but because it gave us space to breathe, to recalibrate, to stop hurting each other, just to ease our own pain. Some evenings, I'd find Lucas sitting on the cracked front steps, staring at the fading desert sky. We didn't talk, but I'd sit beside him, letting the cool air and soft twilight say what neither of us could. Sometimes, all you need is to show up, not to fix, not to explain, but simply to be present. Over time, that silence became less about anger and more about possibility. In the quiet, I remembered stories I hadn't thought of in years. The time we built a fort from fallen branches, the summer we tried and failed to sleep under the stars, our secret lists of wishes tucked between pages of old coloring books. I started to understand that loving someone didn't mean erasing every mistake, but accepting that no one, not even family, is infallible. Slowly, gently, the bitterness receded. My heart still carried scars, but beneath them, resilience was growing. Lucas was changing too. I caught glimpses of it in the careful way he treated Mom, the small chores he took up without being asked, the way he lingered near me, even when words still felt too heavy. Our silence was not an ending, I realized, but the uncertain beginning of something new, something quieter, yes, but perhaps stronger for all we'd endured. And so, the sweet silence settled between us, not as a sign of defeat, but as a fragile offering, a space to remember, to mourn, and eventually to hope again. Facing each other and forgiveness, there is a particular heaviness in the days leading up to reckoning. A rare silence that seems to thicken in every corner of the house. I felt it long before I saw Lucas, felt it in my own restless sleep, in the way Mom hummed nervously as she folded laundry, in the measured steps Dad made across the tiles. There was breathlessness between us, a collective bracing for some conversation we all knew had to come. Forgiveness, I'd always assumed, was like flipping a switch. But as the weeks bled into months, I realized it was a slower process, more mosaic than miracle, as fragile as the trust that had broken. It happened on one of those cloudless Albuquerque evenings, when the sun burns gold across the horizon, and nothing seems to move except the wind in the sycamores. I was in my room, sorting through a pile of notebooks, when I heard the faintest knock at my door. Not the confident knock of a little brother coming to joke or ask for help, but something softer, uncertain, almost an apology in itself. I hesitated. My anger had become a kind of armor, shielding my heart against fresh disappointment. Part of me wanted to turn away, to let Lucas sit in the discomfort he'd caused, to underline the distance until he understood just how deep the hurt ran. But another part, the older sister part, the part that still remembered his childhood laugh and the secrets we'd traded under the mulberry tree, caved in. I opened the door. Lucas stood in the hall with his shoulders hunched, hands fidgeting at his sides, refusing to meet my eye. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air hummed with everything unsaid. Then, his voice broke the stillness, soft but steady. "Can we talk?" The conversation started awkwardly, as if we were strangers, not siblings tied by lifetimes of memories. Lucas tried to speak, but words got tangled in his throat. He began to apologize, haltingly at first, then with a rawness I hadn't seen in him for years. "I know I screwed up. I should have told the truth, to you, to Mom and Dad. I took everything for granted. I thought you'd always be there to fix my mistakes. I didn't know how to stop lying, even when it hurt you." My own guard began to slip. I listened, arms folded tightly, half defiant and half
I
relieved.
didn't mean for it to
Lucas
happen.
talked about the pressure he'd felt, the weight of family expectations, the shame of falling short, the fear of losing the only real support he'd ever had.
Right here, man.
He confessed to being angry with
He was yelling
himself,
into his phone
to
about
resenting the mess he'd made, and the silence that had fallen between us. For the first time, he spoke about the pain of seeing me withdraw, how he missed my advice, my jokes, the way I'd always been there at the end of the worst days. Tears shone in his eyes, and even though I tried to hold on to my fury, something inside me softened. I realized forgiveness wasn't a gift you handed over in a perfect moment. It was the slow work of listening and choosing to believe in the possibility of change. I told Lucas about my anger, about the sadness of watching him drift, the sting of his betrayal. I told him how hard it was to not protect him, how much it hurt to be the one left carrying both our secrets. We both cried, a messy, cathartic kind of crying that felt like breaking and healing at once. Lucas didn't beg for absolution. He just asked for a chance to be present again, to start patching what he'd torn. I considered all that had happened, the years of sibling loyalty, the recklessness, the long aftermath of silence. I thought about Grandma Rosa's words, how forgiveness grows slowly, like seeds beneath the cracked earth, and how sometimes showing up for each other is the bravest thing we can do. The house felt different after that night. We didn't rush to tell Mom and Dad every detail. This healing belonged to us first. Slowly, Lucas started mending the little things, helping with chores, returning home for dinners, finding a part-time job to help rebuild trust. Sometimes he'd linger in the doorway just to ask about my day, careful but sincere. There were awkward moments, some relapses into old patterns, but we persisted. I let myself trust him in small increments. I remembered why I'd always believed in him, and he started to believe in himself again. Forgiveness, I learned, doesn't mean erasing pain or pretending nothing happened. It means honoring the hurt, naming it out loud, and then choosing, over and over, to move forward anyway. Some days, I still resented what he'd done, wished the rupture had never happened. But I also saw the ways we were both growing, learning to tell the truth, even when it cost us. Our bond was mending, not back to what it was, but into something new, honest, tender, and hard-won. And as the Albuquerque sun set outside our windows, I understood that facing each other and finding forgiveness was the greatest test of love either of us would ever know. Lessons of family bonds. Looking back now, it's wild to think how much the meaning of family and forgiveness has shifted for me. Growing up, I used to picture family as unbreakable, this tight-knit cord, braided by years of shared secrets, accidental bruises, and unspoken promises. But as I stand on the other side of everything that's happened, the betrayal, the anger, that looming silence, and the hesitant steps toward forgiveness, I know that family isn't just about belonging. It's about what you do when you feel you no longer belong. For months after making peace with Lucas, I caught myself replaying every moment in my mind, as if I could rewrite the past by remembering it hard enough. Sometimes, in the quiet of my own room, I'd laugh at our childhood games, the cardboard forts, the lemon sticky hands, Grandma's old music drifting through open windows. Other nights, I'd feel the ache of what we lost when trust broke, and how hard it had been to choose forgiveness over anger. Each memory became a lesson, etched deeper, because of how it hurt. I began to notice subtle changes in myself, too. The need to control every outcome, to protect everyone from pain, loosened its grip. I realized that loving my brother, loving anyone, really, meant letting go of the idea that I could shield them from every consequence. Some wounds, I learned, need air and time, not a bandage. Lucas's mistakes didn't disappear because I forgave him. Instead, what changed was my understanding. The only way out of heartbreak is through it, step by step, together if possible, but sometimes alone. Watching Lucas make amends became its own kind of teaching. He didn't transform overnight. He stumbled plenty, missing curfews, losing jobs, sometimes backsliding into his old, defensive silences. But I saw the effort in small ways. He'd help Grandma Rosa weed the garden without being asked, or volunteer to do the late-night grocery run for Mom, or just sit across from me at the kitchen table and actually listen, even when conversation felt awkward. Each of these gestures, tiny as they were, knit us back together in ways that apology alone never could. Mom and Dad, for their part, struggled too. I watched my father's guard drop, little by little, as he welcomed Lucas back into the fold, not with grand speeches or punishments, but by quietly including him in daily routines. My mother cried harder at the return of regular Sunday dinners than she had at the betrayal itself. Watching her serve Lucas a second helping, as if nothing had ever changed, made me realize just how powerful love can be, especially when bruised. Family, I came to see, regenerates. It doesn't pretend wounds never happened, but it refuses to give up on healing. The greatest lesson, the one I wish I'd understood long before, was that forgiveness isn't passive. It isn't just waiting until time dulls the pain. It's an active, sometimes exhausting choice you make, over and over, every time resentment threatens to take root. There were days when I resented how easily Lucas could make Mom laugh, or how he'd slip into old habits, even after everything. I had to remind myself, sometimes hourly, that forgiveness isn't about excusing. It's about remembering the whole story, not just the worst chapter. And then, there were moments of joy that snuck in when I least expected it. Lucas and I started making new memories, watching bad movies together on the living room floor, collaborating on playlists for road trips, helping Grandma with her salsa recipe, getting caught in unexpected summer storms on our way home from the market. These weren't dramatic, heart-stopping moments. They were quiet, gentle reminders that relationships are rebuilt in the everyday choices to show up, to share, to laugh, even when you're still a little hurt. I also learned a lot about myself. That part of me, the one who'd grown so used to carrying everyone else's burdens, had to learn to rest, to allow others to take responsibility for their choices. Looking back, I realized I wasn't just forgiving my brother. I was forgiving myself for not being able to keep everything perfect, for needing space and silence, for being vulnerable and sometimes angry. That, maybe, was the hardest lesson. Learning that real strength comes from letting go, not holding tighter. I've heard people say that wounds within a family never truly disappear. That scars linger, shaping who you become and how you love going forward. Now, I think that's true, but it's not all tragic. Our scars, if we let them, can become reminders that we survived together. They mark the places we had to pull each other close or let each other go, just so we could find each other again as changed, more honest versions of ourselves. As I watch Lucas move forward, back at college, balancing odd jobs, slowly regaining our parents' trust, I'm more grateful than ever that neither of us walked away for good. Where once I'd have done anything to protect him from pain, now I see the value in experiencing hardship and learning how to fix what's broken. And I remind myself daily, forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, but about choosing hope over hurt and family over pride. To anyone reading this, wondering if forgiveness is worth it, or if family bonds can truly recover after big betrayals, I'd say this: it isn't easy and it isn't fast. But if both sides are willing to listen, to try again, to honor the pain without letting it define the future, something better than the old trust might grow in its place. A quieter, steadier kind of love. Not unbreakable, but unyielding, shaped by everything you've survived together. That's the greatest lesson family ever taught me, and one I'll carry forward no matter how uncertain the road gets next.